interview of Russian skater Kamila Valieva, who tested positive for a banned substance ahead of the games. We'll have more lip.
안녕하세요. 너무 카메라를 너무 숙여놨네. 안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 오늘은 2월 21일, 내일이 2월 22일. 아주 의미 있는 날이군요. 오늘은 2월 21일 월요일입니다. 베이징 동계올림픽이 끝이 났고요. 오늘은 날씨가 아주 좋습니다. 하늘이 아주 맑아요. 하지만 밖에 나가면 춥습니다. 또 뭐가 어떤 특이사항이 있죠? 아주 컬러풀한 새로운 쿠션이 생겼어요. 그리고 여러분 잘 보실지 모르겠지만 이 러그도 바뀌었습니다. 다 모던 하우스 제품이죠. 뭐 그렇습니다. 운동하겠습니다. 발굽혀펴기랑 조금 할게요. 스트레칭은 샤워하면서 했어요. 오늘 진짜 하늘이 너무 이뻐서 커튼을 치고 운동을 하도록 하겠습니다. 하늘이 너무 맑아요. 365일 이랬으면 좋겠네요. 역시 운동할 땐 Shannon.
For treatment, for testing, for building new isolation facilities. In fact, right now, mainland Chinese teams are helping to build these new isolation, quarantine, and treatment facilities in Penny's Bay, that's a corner of Hong Kong located near Hong Kong Disneyland, as well as the old Kai Tak Airport site, the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal. Now, these facilities will be able to provide some 10,000 isolation beds, but when you talk to experts, they say it's not enough. In fact, experts at the University of Hong Kong have said that, look, right now, Hong Kong is reporting 6,000 new daily cases of COVID a day. That will surge to 28,000 new daily cases a day by March. Back to you.
Wow, so cases rising. It's certainly not enough for isolation beds. Christy, just explain what went wrong in Hong Kong. How did it get to this point?
In a word, it could be summed up as complacency. Hong Kong has had 2 years to stockpile testing kits.
자, 여러분 폼 눌러는 무조건 있어야 됩니다.
To build isolation centers
여러분,
and quarantine
30대
facilities.
여러분,
Hong Kong
남성
has had
여러분,
just under a
폼
year
눌러 무조건
ago
사세요.
when the vaccination system was rolled out, just under a year to get certain members of the population, especially the most vulnerable and the elderly, to be vaccinated and boosted. All of that time and opportunity has been squandered. And that's why we are at this place today where Hong Kong is literally scrambling for resources, getting resources from mainland China. Mainland China rebuking Hong Kong authorities last week. That's what we got in the form of that message from Chinese President Xi Jinping. And now we're hearing from experts that despite this surge of activity to be able to create more isolation beds and quarantine spaces, looking at the models out there, it's still not enough to deal with the surge of infection that is coming our way. Back to you.
It's head scratching, and looking at those scenes, they're like the scenes we saw in New York before vaccines were even available. Christy Start in Hong Kong. Thanks very much. Well, 2 incidents involving police and protesters are under investigation after a violent weekend of protests and nearly 200 arrests in Canada. Ontario's Special Investigations Unit is looking into a serious injury reported by a woman who interacted with a police officer on a horse. The group is also investigating the use of anti-riot weapons during the protests. No injuries have been reported so far, but the Special Investigations Unit is asking anyone who may have been hit by a projectile to contact them. Still to come on CNN, we are following a high-stakes, last-ditch effort at diplomacy for a peaceful resolution to the Russian-Ukraine crisis.
Sure about this?
Of course. My dad's nice. Dad, this is Mickey.
Hello, Mr. Fargo.
Please, call me sir. Wow, the supermarket here's got it so big. That's my drink.
Oh, sir, I'll take care of the drinks.
Yeah. Okay. I'm hungry. Hi, here, take our picture. I'm full. Come on, we have a long drive back.
Sir, let me drive for you.
That's Central Hub. This part of Tarlac has really developed.
Sir, this is my train.
What do you think of me? Cheap?
That's not what I meant, sir.
Just kidding.
Sir, I'll go ahead.
Thanks. Till next time. Miggy.
Nice one, Bob.
The world's biggest business stories. From every corner of the globe. Marketplace Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East.
Cristiano Manpour in Amsterdam, Jerusalem, Sarajevo, Afghanistan. I'm Cristiano Manpour in Iran. Cristiano Manpour, CNN, with elements of the Galilee division in Israel. As dusk fell, people were still marching. Here we are in Habila, a village that has not had any food distribution since June. When the families have finished looking at the names that are posted on those boards, they come here. This is now a memorial to the victims of the Srebrenica massacre. We're very interested to see what's going on. Mr. President, it's a privilege to address you from Sarajevo. Do you not think that the constant flip-flops of your administration on the issue of Bosnia sets a very dangerous precedent? This is a pretty shocking picture. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths? You still have huge dreams. They didn't take that away from you. In a matter of 26 days, legislation was passed. I wonder whether you ever think that other countries can learn from what you did. What made you be so passionate about the environment? I saw you listening to that testimony. You look pretty broken up yourself. Does love have a chance still of winning?
I always believe that.
Welcome back. I'm Michael Holmes in Lviv in Ukraine. The White House says US President Joe Biden has agreed in principle to a summit with the Russian President Vladimir Putin on Ukraine. Now, the French brokered summit represents a last-ditch effort at diplomacy as the military crisis intensifies. But the White House warns the meeting can only take place if Russia doesn't invade Ukraine in the interim, and would also only occur after US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov meet on Thursday. All of this happening as new satellite images show increased activity among forces massed near Ukraine's northeastern border. And the US Defense Secretary says an invasion could lead to mass casualties.
You could see a significant amount of combat power move very quickly down to take Kyiv. So in terms of the types of things that could happen, one only need to look at what's on the other side of the Ukrainian border. If he employs that kind of combat power, it will certainly create enormous casualties within the civilian population.
Meanwhile, sources tell CNN the US has intelligence that Russian commanders have received orders to attack Ukraine, not clear when, however, and importantly. CNN's Jim Sciutto following that part of the story.
According to the latest U.S. intelligence assessment, orders have been sent to Russian tactical commanders to proceed with an invasion. This, according to officials with direct knowledge of the intelligence, telling myself and my colleague Natasha Bertrand. We should be clear, however, that the U.S. is looking for multiple indicators that an invasion is coming. This is one of them, but others, such as electronic jamming or massive cyber attacks against Ukraine, have not yet been observed. It is also worth noting that orders such as this could be rescinded, or this could be part of a misinformation campaign intended to mislead the U.S. and its allies. However, this intelligence comes as we've heard public statements from the most senior U.S. officials, including the President, the Vice President, and the Secretary of State, saying in recent days that the U.S. now believes Putin has made a decision to invade. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying today, in his words, that the Russian playbook is moving forward. Jim Sciutto, CNN, Lviv, Ukraine.
And joining me here now in Lviv Live is CNN's international security editor, Nick Payton-Walsh. Good to have you back, Nick. You've worked and lived in Russia for years and covered the early days of Putin. I'm curious, what is your take on who might be in his ear? Who is giving him advice? And crucially, is there anyone around to say, no, that's a bad idea?
Yeah, and that is the fundamental question behind all of this. Has he made a decision, and was that decision informed by what most outsiders think would be the catastrophic nature of deciding to send 150,000 troops into a country which has a pretty visceral level of discuss what the Kremlin's been doing over the past years? There is a cabal of what they call Siloviki, the people behind the security industries, very much supporting Vladimir Putin. Mostly men in their late 60s, the defense minister Sergei Shoigu, Alexander Portnikov, the head of the FSB, the national security head, Patrushev. These are all men steeped in the former KGB, in their past around Putin, and I think all probably too with an eye on the future as well. Nobody is immortal, and so criminologists will be thinking at this stage, if really Vladimir Putin does go ahead and do this extraordinary military maneuver compared to by the UK Prime Minister as the plan for the biggest war in Europe since 1945. Is that done out of some internal dynamic or some external misinformation? Has he been told this will be easy and a cakewalk? Most people, I think, look at this as the possibility of a comparable experience to the Soviets in Afghanistan, if they really did do this. And so, yes, it's the quality of information that he's getting. A lot of Western officials you speak to say they are concerned that COVID has left this man who's always been seen isolating himself behind kind of an antiseptic curtain almost, increasingly less well informed about what's actually going on the outside world. And what may befall is any adventure he tries to undertake here.
Yeah, which is an extraordinary thought, isn't it? And that distancing, even literally with that massive table as he keeps his distance from everyone. But to the point of, is there anyone to say no? I mean, is he the type of man, is he the type of character people could go up and say this is not a good idea, or they just listen to whatever he says?
It's very difficult to balance the idea of this Russian leader who has the world sort of on tenterhooks here, who has the US and Europe bracing themselves that his calculated moves could launch the continent into some sort of broader conflict. To balance that idea of a rational actor who's managed to sustain his place in power and maneuver Russia back into a position in the world stage, that rational actor with a completely irrational actor who would plough Russia straight into this extraordinary military catastrophe, frankly, not just for Ukraine, but likely for thousands of Russian soldiers and lives as well. So those two things are essentially the answer to the question here. How do you reconcile the rational man we've seen rise over decades and the irrational act that's supposed to be about to be happening, according to US officials?
Yeah, fascinating insight. Great to have you here, Nick, our international security editor, Nick Payton-Walsh, with us. He will be back next hour, so stick around for more of our conversation. All right. Moving on, last hour, I talked to the president of the Kyiv School of Economics, Timothy Maravanov, and he was also a former Minister of Economic Development and Trade in Ukraine, and I asked him about the damage done to Ukraine's economy because of this crisis. Here's what he said.
Well, even if there is none, there is already a lot of damage. Access to capital markets, capitalization of the companies, logistical problems, insurance costs going up. The GDP forecast a couple of weeks ago was revised down by about 1%. And there are estimates produced by our analysts, Kyiv School of Economics and others, that a blockade, let's say if there is a blockade of the ports, that could hurt us between 0.5% to 3% GDP per month. This is just without any kinetic action, without an invasion. If there is kinetic action, that depends, because it's really hard to assess the specific scenarios. But we have some data, we have some experience in 2014 when the East was invaded and when Crimea next, the Ukrainian GDP dropped by 14% because of that. So that was the damage, and the overall assessment of the damage in 2014 and further was, the estimates range from $70 to $200 billion, which is approximately 1 year GDP of Ukraine currently.
All right, I'm Michael Holmes in Lviv, Ukraine. I will be back with more next hour. For now, let's go back to Linda Kincaid at the CNN Centre with the day's other top stories. Linda.
Thank you, my friend. Good to have you there in Lviv for us, Ukraine. Michael Holmes there. Well, northern Argentina is being devastated by ongoing fires. Officials say over 1 million acres, or nearly 405,000 hectares, have been scorched by the record-breaking fires. Experts blame a historic drought and 2 years of high temperatures. Local authorities have declared a state of emergency and have dispatched hydrant planes to combat the fires. And rescue operations are ongoing in Brazil, but the death toll is rising after those deadly landslides north of Rio de Janeiro last Tuesday. The number of fatalities rose slightly on Sunday to 157. More than 150 people remain missing. Hundreds have lost their homes or have been displaced. For our international viewers, World Sport is coming up next. For those watching here in the United States, I'll be back with more news after this short break. You're watching CNN.
We've missed the globetrotting and adventures, and we're longing to get out and go.
This is living.
Uncovering the city's DNA.
Feel the need to go in.
Meeting people who will share its secrets.
How about them cowboys, baby?
And making discoveries that wow. It's a world of wonder. Now go and see it. Saturday on CNN in association with Turkish Airlines.
The beauty of the photograph is that when people do view the images, they have that visceral response. And I think when we can see an image of a fellow brother or sister around the world and we connect to that person, it brings it home, it makes it personal. My name is Lisa Christine, and I'm a humanitarian photographer. I believe that we can all do something to help in the fight against slavery. Something that really stands out to me is my experience that I had on Lake Volta in Ghana, where thousands of kids are enslaved in the fishing villages. The kids there work inordinate amount of hours on an enormous body of water, although they're not taught how to swim. They are fishing and pulling in nets, and it's pretty intense out there on that lake. There's a young boy named Kofi who I met at a shelter. He had actually very recently been rescued, and I made this particular image at a well where this young boy was bathing, and he has all these water droplets on his face. But the thing that really stands out to me is that some months later I learned that he had been reunited with his family, and then he got to go to school. And I think, well, who is he going to become because somebody took a stand for him?
The fight for the old city is a closing chapter of ISIS's presence. They have left absolute devastation in their wake. Extraordinary to stand exactly where ISIS may in fact have been conducting attacks against the West. This is a strange new world in Syria, the end game of the fight against ISIS. NATO ally facing NATO ally. The United States said fired missiles from another state. That's a lot. What would be the consequence of an American military strike on Iran and on our war? We get rare permission to enter. We're headed now deep inside gang territory. Venezuela's dark lurch into poverty and chaos. This crisis all created by the mad policies of a government that now wants to hide the collapse. Eerily quiet, isn't it? This city almost constantly living with the threat of a Russian invasion. Mission planning, American air power.
So many questions about what is the federal government doing. Do you get the anger that is out here? How concerned are you about the front line? You don't believe that there's a racial divide here? Looking back, as president, did you tell the story of race in America enough, do you think?
All the places I've been and all the things I've seen, all the people I've talked to, I carry with me. They're part of what I do right here, holding the powerful accountable, keeping them honest.
AC 360, Tuesday through Saturday only on CNN. Want a daily dose of Fareed and his team? Now you can get it with Fareed's Global Briefing, the newsletter that gives you the best insight and analysis on global affairs. Go to cnn.com/Fareed to sign up.
I
there, welcome to CNN's World Sport this Monday. I'm Patrick Snell. China's Winter Olympics are in the books. These games taking place against the backdrop of the ongoing global pandemic, yet they also brought with them compelling storylines, raw emotion, and of course that doping scandal that really did overshadow Beijing 2022. The ups and downs, though, perhaps best observed through the eyes of the bobsledder Lana Myers-Taylor, who carried the American flag on Sunday during the game's closing ceremony in the Bird's Nest Stadium. Now, the 37-year-old having been selected to be the flag bearer in the opening ceremony, only for a positive COVID-19 test to keep her confined to her hotel. With more now, CNN's Selena Wang.
The Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics ended with victory, heartbreak, and relief. To China, these games were a success. Beijing managed to pull off the games in the middle of a pandemic without any major outbreaks inside or outside the bubble, becoming the first city to host both a summer and winter Olympics, showing off a wealthier and more powerful China. And it was incredible to be inside the Bird's Nest during that closing ceremony. It was electrifying. Even though we were sitting in the cold for several hours, the invited fans were excited, doing the wave, waving their iPhone lights in the air to the music, clapping loudly. And there was a feeling of relief as well for these athletes who have been spending so much time trying to avoid getting COVID, just trying to make it into Beijing and be able to compete, and now they can finally let loose for a moment. And these games have often felt dystopian. We're often surrounded by workers in hazmat suits. We have PCR tests every day. We have to be completely separate from the rest of China's population. And this closing ceremony was finally a moment where it felt like a party. There were lights, music, and it ended with dramatic fireworks. But these games will also be remembered for controversy and scandal. The opening ceremony began with Vladimir Putin as the guest of honor. The US and some of its allies have boycotted these games as a protest against allegations of China's human rights abuses. In addition to that, I will never forget the moment that I saw 15-year-old figure skating star Kamila Valieva take the ice for the last time in Beijing. Her performance was full of stumbles and mistakes, marred by a doping scandal that once again put the spotlight on Russia's history of state-sponsored doping. But despite the controversy, the geopolitical tensions, and the scandal, the athletes still persevered. They brought the world together, they set new records, and still mesmerized the world with their performances. Selena Wang, CNN, Beijing.
Well, with 16 gold medals, Norway finishing top of the table. No country's ever won that many at the Winter Games. Germany second in the table with 12 gold medals. Well, America's Michaela Schifrin, one of the greatest skiers ever, but the two-time Olympic gold medalist surprisingly failing to finish in 3 of her 6 events at these Winter Games. But you know, her powerful thoughts and insights revealing so much more about her extraordinary life journey. Schifrin one-on-one now with our man there in China, Koi Wire.
The pinnacle of the last 4 years of work is over now and did not really go that well for me. However, you can fail and not be a failure, lose and actually be a loser because you lost, but still also be a winner. It's just what you do on a daily basis. Some days you lose and some days you win.